I'm Sharnita and I work with the JobsForHer team. With the nationwide lockdown being extended, corporate India is having to get used to a new normal, working from home and adapting to changing environments. In this situation, working professionals need to keep all their wits about them and get to task at hand with vigor and inventiveness. Skills like problem solving become especially important at this time. This is why Jobs for Her has organized a masterclass on the same with an industry leader. Sakshi Shrivastava Desai is a global compliance strategy and analytics lead at the Johnson & Johnson Pharma Group. In this role, Sakshi is responsible for oversight and governance of pharmacovigilance related audits and inspections and drives progress to resolve non-compliance with the cross-functional business partners globally across sectors. Sakshi has worked for companies like GSK, Tata Consultancy Services, Sky Formics, I hope I got it right, Sakshi, and has led various global roles, mainly responsible for oversight of the medical governance and compliance functions involving effective risk management strategies and establishing and overseeing a robust internal control framework. Apart from being instrumental in establishing quality culture within organization, Sakshi has also contributed heavily to promoting women at work, both within and outside her organization, and works as a women in STEM representative for her organization to promote STEM careers for women with limited means in India and globally. Over to you, Sakshi. Please keep yourself muted and we'll take questions after the session.
Great. Thank you, Sharnita, for that introduction. I'll just do a quick check. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Perfect. And I'm going to now share my screen. Can you see my screen well?
Yes, I think we need full screen.
Yep.
Yeah, done.
Perfect. So thanks, Sharnita, for that introduction. And hi, everyone. As Sharnita mentioned, I'm Sakshi Desai, and I work with Johnson & Johnson at the moment in their bioresearch, quality and compliance group. So basically, I'm a part of the quality group, which means that on a day-to-day basis, I'm bombarded with a lot of problems, and that's my daily job of basically solving problems, and not just mine. I think in any kind of role that we do, problem solving is at the core of everyday lives. And whether you are running your own business or you are in an organization, solving problem will always remain one of your key duties, right? And today, that's exactly what we are here to do. We are going to review some of the key skills you need in order to solve problems effectively, and basically looking at the approach we can take to solve problems, especially in times like these when we have a crisis situation or a complexity or a global fallout like we have now. Just a disclaimer before we begin, all the thoughts and ideas that I'll be presenting are my own and from my experience and do not represent that of my company. Okay, so let's start with a quote. So it's not the problem that bothers us as much as it's the uncertainty in our inability to handle it. The uncertainty aspect is beyond our control, but we can surely develop the ability to either solve it, face it, or rise above it, as Gopal Das rightly puts it. And that's what we will do today in our masterclass, to really see how can we develop that ability to solve problems, or either face it head on and rise above it. What are the objectives? So the main objective today would be to really understand what it takes to be an efficient problem solver. What are those skills that we need in today's complex environment? And we will also review some examples on how these skills have been put to use in the real world. And what's not in scope is tools and techniques on problem solving, like DMAC, training techniques, RCA. And the reason is that 30-40 minutes are just not enough to go through the wide spectrum of tools and techniques that are available. But let's look at the basic approach and the skill set that you really need to solve problems. Okay, so before we get into what is it that we need to do or have to become effective problem solvers, I want us to think about what prevents us from becoming one. We are used to, in everyday life, we have so many obstacles, right, in our day-to-day lives where we are to take decisions, to solve problems, whether it's professional, personal, regarding our kids, and we are all exposed to this really largely. Why is it then that some people are really efficient at problem solving while others fail at it or not that great enough? So I wanted to show a video to kind of make you think, and I'm hoping that this will work and you'll be able to hear.
We don't hear the audio.
You're not able to hear the audio? Okay. So let me just play it out and then I'll explain what it talks about.
Yes.
Okay. So basically, it's about this person who's returning from his work and he's had a great successful day, but then he's forgotten to wish his friend happy birthday. And he thinks that he'll go home and wish. But then when he gets home, he has so many important other things like chores and emails that he forgets again. And the next day he's thinking, what happened that I forgot such an important thing? And then the reason that that shows here is that your mind is meant to really create ideas, right? Your mind is not meant to hold ideas. Let me go back. Yeah, so the video basically said that your mind is meant for creating ideas and not for holding them. And what we end up doing most often than not is that we end up giving it so many unimportant tasks to remember, like daily chores and small things like I need to call that person or I need to go and buy that grocery or things like which does not need to be occupying a space in our heads, but we end up doing that, right? And to be an effective problem solver, you need uh, to have your mind which is boundaryless and which is thinking in the right direction. You don't necessarily need the tools and techniques, but really have an uninhibited mind that can create ideas and do out of box thinking. So that's the first takeaway that I want you to have, is that your mind is meant for creating ideas and not holding them. So any unimportant stuff that you have in your mind, you need to get out of your mind, put it in a list somewhere and refer back to it rather than putting it in your mind, and use your mental space for ideating and thinking and organizing the compartments of your brain in a way that you can think without boundaries. Um, so what are some, so that's one of the main barriers that comes towards problem solving, that you don't have that mental bandwidth at all. What are some of the other barriers in problem solving? And I'm covering the barriers first before getting into skills, because we need to first understand what can come in your way and then look at what are the skills you would need. So some of the barriers against problem solving are, the first one is the difficulty to recognize that there is a problem, and which is one of the most commonly occurring barrier, because in your day-to-day job, when you're so busy with your deliverables and that you tend to overlook the problem, or you kind of brushing it away. So that's one of the biggest barriers. The other thing is knowing when a problem requires intervention. So not every problem will require an immediate attention or an immediate actions, right? So to have that kind of understanding of when exactly do you go ahead and intervene and take an action is also one of the extremely important steps. And they are, not knowing that can be your barrier. The other three are around your understanding of the problem. So a poorly framed problem, size of the problem, and failure to identify and address all the parts of the problem can be your other areas and barriers that can come in way of your problem solving. Because if you don't have a problem that's properly described, with all the implications of the problem, covering all the aspects of the problem, and you're only looking at one part of the problem, you will never be able to address the problem in its completeness. The other barrier is lack of a roots identification. So yes, you have identified and recognized there is a problem. You know that it requires intervention. You have defined it well. But if you are not able to then identify what caused the problem from its root, you will never be able to completely resolve the issue, and you will never be able to prevent it from recurring. So that's one of the barriers of when you're not able to identify the root. The other two are more from a mindset perspective of fear of leaving your comfort zone. So most not for does not apply to all kinds of problems, but in complex problems, when you have something which is extending out to the entire organization wide or globally, you have that fear of venturing out into unknown zones, and the fear of leaving out your comfort zone, and that can also prevent you from thinking beyond boundaries and pushing yourself. The other thing is the negative mindset of yourself and the people around you can be very big barriers. This may sound insignificant, but then, it happens. Like for me, I have to deal with problems all the time because of the function that I am in. And if someone comes and tells me, that, oh, this is just not possible to solve, or the management is not going to give you the budget, there's no way you can resolve it. So that kind of a negative mindset has an impact on your ability to think and function. So that's another barrier towards problem solving. Right. So problem solving involves overcoming all of these barriers and then applying your skill sets to achieving a successful solution. I'm now going to get into the basic steps of problem solving, and we're going to do this very quickly because, like I said, let's focus on the skills, but I still, this is important to understand what kind of framework. So there, as you all know, there are different tools and techniques available for problem solving. But no matter which method you choose, the basic framework is going to remain this, where your first step is to really know that the problem exists, like we just said, and then define it. And what do you need to define the problem? You need to gather the information and know all parts of the problem. And knowing and all parts of the problem is still not enough. You also need to understand the impact and the risks each part can pose. And again, looking at it from a 360-degree view, and not just looking at it from locally, because when you're looking and evaluating the impact and risks, you have to be able to evaluate the risk and implications for all the different parts, for globally, right? So there is this saying that think global and act local. So that's something that you need to apply here. When you're thinking about the problem, think of it from all the different perspectives. And once you're able to do that, you can understand your current state, where you are today. You also need to evaluate what your future state is. Where do you want to be? And once you have both your current state and your future state, you can then get into evaluating the root cause, right? And you have various methods to do that, and we'll see it shortly. Evaluate the root cause, and don't just be there at the symptoms or the causal factor level, but really go deep down to what the root cause was. And once you understand the root cause of the problem, you're then going to develop solutions to eliminate these root cause or causes. And my suggestion always is to have multiple solutions, to use divergent thinking. Don't just be thinking convergently to arrive at one solution, but evaluate and develop multiple solutions so that you're able to then select the best fit, post consensus, and then implement that best fit for your elimination of your root cause. Now, while you are doing all of this, also remember to fix the issue at hand. And so while you're looking at the root cause and developing solutions for a long-term fix so that it does not recur, you also need to make sure that you're fixing it right now with a short-term solution so that it does not keep getting deeper and deeper while you're doing all these other steps. So that's also something to think of and remember. So what happens most of the time is when you have implemented a solution, you stop there. But that's not where you should stop, right? You need to go back and you need to set a measure, a scale, and go back to measure the effectiveness of the solution that you had implemented. Did it really work to fix the problem? Did it really work to ensure that there is no recurrence? Did it cause any other problems in any of the other areas that we were not anticipating? So those are some of the things that you must go back and check on. And then at the end, I always say that evaluate, reevaluate, and seek feedback. And this step is important as well, which most people miss out on because of, again, being so busy with your daily routine. But it's important to go back so that if there is any other problem arising or if there's something that has not worked, you are on top of it and you can take action when required. So for the first 3 or 4 things that I said, a problem statement, you need to really know a problem well defined is a problem half solved. And as Einstein always said, that if he had 1 hour to solve a problem, he would spend 55 minutes in understanding the problem and 5 minutes in putting the solutions. So that's too far stretched, but the basic underlying principle is that you need to define your problem well to be able to then solve it. That's one of the critical steps. And so you have to really spend as much time as you can breaking down your problems into smaller parts, understanding what happened versus what should have ideally happened. When did it happen? How did it happen? Who identified it? What are the other areas affected? What is the scope of the issue? What are the risks and impact, not just locally or regionally, but globally if applicable? And the one thing that you need to remember, where again most people go wrong, is you don't have to look at why it went wrong at this stage. You need to only focus on what went wrong, right? And to answer the question of what, there are other things that you will ask, like how, when, where, and all of that. But do not get to the why yet, because the minute you get to the why, you are defocusing and you're getting into the solution mode, which you should not at this stage. And finally, when you have all of these questions answered, you're going to be able to define a well-focused problem statement, and which is then going to give you a well-defined answer as well. The next step is to then understand the root cause. Again, like I said earlier, that you should always try to get to the bottom and underlying deep diving root cause, and not just look at the symptom or the causal factor. And I've just put this up as, just to give you an example of what I mean from that. For example, let's take this example. You have a bleeding of your gum. Whenever you're brushing, your gums bleed. And you go to the doctor and he tells you it's a gum disease and he gives you medication for that. You take it, you're fine, But then what happens? In some days, some weeks, you get that problem back. Why is it? Why does it happen? Is because you had, you looked at the symptoms and you only addressed the causal factor. You did not go down to the root cause. The root cause of your problem, of your gum disease, was poor oral hygiene, which you did not address. And because of that, it came back. So if the doctor had gone down to what your routine is like, what is your oral hygiene, are you brushing your teeth twice a day, for example, he probably would have been able to eliminate your problem from the root and not have it recurred. So that's just a small example to tell you that you need to go down to the root cause. And for the root cause, you have various methods available, which we won't get into today, but you can come back to me if you need more information on these. So we have the 5 whys, we have the Ishikawa, the causal factor tree. There are innumerable methods for understanding your root causes. The next step is then to evaluate, implement, and test your solutions, right? So when you're evaluating solutions, like I mentioned earlier, use divergent thinking. So what is divergent thinking really? What does it do? So divergent thinking is a method of thinking by which you are collecting information, data, and you are using it for diverse idea generation. And this really comes with creative thinking. You're having diverse teams of people who are going to help you think about ideas that are unconventional, wide-ranging, so basically coming up with multiple solutions. And then once you have your multiple options ready, that's when you will use your convergent thinking to then choose the best option from the various alternatives that you had. And when you're choosing your option, remember whether this is going to prevent your recurrence or not, and what else can be done to prevent the same cause arising elsewhere in your organization. You don't want something else to go wrong while you are trying to fix one thing. And then you want to implement your selected solution, but you also have to make sure that you, prior to implementation, you have tested, verified, and validated to ensure that there are minimum risks of creating other issues, like I said, and also minimize any issues to the current product, process, or system, or whatever it is that you're dealing with. And finally, like I mentioned, evaluate and test your solution to make sure that it was effective and in mitigating your risks that were identified, and that you've been able to prevent the recurrence of the issue. So these are basic steps that we discussed. Now, everyone kind of know these steps, right? So what is it that great problem solvers do differently? What are the skills that they have? So I've listed down some steps, some skills here. I'm going to read them out very quickly, and then because these are too many of these, we are going to look at a few of these in our next following slides. But yeah, I've listed them down here for you. So some of the things are, a great problem solver will have deep technical expertise of what you're talking about, right? What the problem is. So deep technical expertise. He will have the ability to think on his feet and ask the right questions. An ability to take risks without fear or apprehensions. Prompt decision-making ability. He will also have a broad strategic focus rather than narrow focus. So, like I said, you need to think global and then act local. So having a broad strategic focus would always help you. They also have an innate ability to filter out the key drivers and big wins, especially when you have a complex problem, when it's extending out to the whole organization. It becomes very overwhelming. And so you need to have that ability to be able to pick out those key drivers and big wins and then work on those instead of like going all over the place. Great problem solvers have extremely good effective time management skills, because they need to make sure things are moving on time and you're giving the results and the solutions in a timely manner. You cannot be late in delivering your solutions towards a problem. And therefore, this is important. The other thing is having an inclusive and open-minded outlook or adaptability. Because without being open-minded, if you have a fixed mindset, you're not going to be able to look at the different solutions. You're not going to have a boundaryless mind. So it's very important to have that. And at the same time, have the flexibility and be open to different ideas and be flexible in changing the norm. Excellent problem solvers have to have excellent interpersonal skills. And this is important because you're not going to be working in silos, right? You're going to be in a team. You're going to have to work with different stakeholders across your organization or your different fields of work. You're going to have to get sponsorship buy-in for implementation of your solutions. So unless you have interpersonal skills and you're able to convince everybody on the team, you're not going to be able to really get to a solution and implement those. The other thing that great problem solvers do differently is they avoid silos and they engage in cross-collaboration. They put the right resources at the right places by really understanding what the hidden potential of the team is. And at the end, they also celebrate the progress of the group. Now, again, this may sound insignificant, but it goes a long way in motivating and keeping the team on their toes to really encourage participation. So these are some of the skills broadly, but so where do you start? If you're new to problem solving or if you're having a tough time, where do you begin? So I think the first thing to do is to stay out of the box, or in other words, adapt to critical thinking. And this way of approaching a question, it allows you to, deconstruct the situation, reveal its hidden issues like, is there a bias, is there manipulation of data, and then make the best decision. So deconstructing a situation is very important. And people who do critical thinking, they will, rather than going for what feels right or intuitively I think this is the best solution, rather than doing that, they will subject everything, all available options, all the data to scrutiny and skepticism. You need to ask questions like, what concepts are at work? What assumptions exist? Is my interpretation of the situation logically sound? Am I considering all the implications, all possible implications? You also need to explore other people's point of views. And when you're doing this kind of approach, you're able to explore your own choices, evaluate them and the alternative solutions, and then you're able to make an informed decision. Yeah, so stay out of the box. The other thing to do is to go to the data and not the information. So what do I mean here? Information is your secondary source of data, which is derived from your primary source, which is your data. So information is basically synopsis of the data, right? And that has been given to you by somebody who came to you saying that I have a problem. That information that is presented to you is his own interpretation of the primary data. So don't ever get into the trap of just using that information. It's not about not trusting your people, but it's more about making your own judgment with the primary source of data. So 2 things from this slide: stay out of the box, have critical thinking, evaluate each of these questions for all the options you have, and go to the primary source of data and do not rely on the information that is being given to you. What else? So get the right team, yeah? So like I was saying earlier, it's important to break down silos. When you want to solve problems effectively, you need to get a diverse team with wide perspectives. You cannot do this alone. You have to have people on your team. And you need to have diverse people, like I said. So you need to have people from the same function. For example, if you're working on a quality issue, find another quality professional who can understand your jargons and methods, but also have people from other functions who are able to challenge you and challenge your thinking. The other thing to remember is to have a subject matter expert. You cannot be an expert at everything, right? But to be a problem solver, like I mentioned earlier, it's important to have deep technical expertise, but you can't always be an expert. For example, in my own case, I'm into compliance and quality, right? But I solve problems for people in the commercial field. I'm working with marketing, I'm working with legal, I'm working with medical research. I don't always know what the processes are that they are following. So I always have to have one subject matter expert who can then help me understand whatever I need to understand about the process. So these are some of the key things for you to move in the right direction. The other thing to do is to go back to the beginning and ask what changed. So the minute someone comes to you with a problem, the first thing that you should ask is what changed. And what do I mean by this? Most often than not, what we do is we work with what we have today, right? So if somebody tells me that a system broke down in March of 2020, I start with, okay, what happened? Why did it break? What happened there? But it's important to go back to the beginning. When was the system established first? Was it 2016 maybe? What happened there? What was the team in place? What was the process you followed at that time? What changed? Was there a system upgrade? Did the team change? Did the process change? Did you train the people on that system change? And go from there, right? So go back to the beginning and ask the right questions. So you keep asking, and then that helps you, when you lay out the whole process from the beginning, it helps you to connect the dots, and then you're able to map out a realistic plan of action. And you're able to build a strategy of how will you approach the problem and manage the problem. And the other thing which is linked to all of this is asking the right questions, right? So a question asked in the right way will point towards its own answer. And though you're going to do all this as a part of your root cause, but I always suggest to do this even when you are at the beginning of the stage and trying to define the problem. Asking the right questions gets you the right information, points you to the right direction. So always do that. And one tip that I would like to give you all here is, whenever when you have so much of data, when you're in and day out into a problem, try to step away. Stepping away from the problem helps your subconscious mind gets to work. And it's really amazing, what solutions sometimes pop up into your mind when you're not even thinking about that problem anymore. So do try to step away and then come back to it. Okay. So these are some of the basic things that you needed to start off. Now also let's also review some of the skills that are needed throughout the life cycle, especially in complex times, and let's see in real time how people have put it to use in today's situation. And like I said, necessity is the mother of invention, and in times of crisis like these, there are so many innovative solutions people come up with. So what are some of the other things that you need to be able to navigate through complex times? So one of the things is innovation and adaptability. Problems get solved when we look at them from a different direction, right? You have to challenge the standard assumptions and push boundaries. So most often than not, what the first assumption that we have is to follow the pattern that has worked in the past. You need to make sure that you break that pattern. Instead, you need to kind of go back and address your consumers' pain points and try to fulfill what their unaddressed needs are. In tough times, everybody has to leave out your comfort zone and look for newer pastures. A good example is Dettol and Lifebuoy. What did they do in 2009 swine flu? They understood the need of their people and they launched hand sanitizers. What did Dettol do now? They launched disinfectant spray. They understood the need of the customer and they launched that. They could have just, they would have anyways made business with their normal sanitizers and hand washes, but they didn't stop there, right? They adapted to the situation, they innovated, and they launched the disinfectant spray. Similarly, Domino's launched a touch-free delivery choice, promising safe pizza deliveries. So why are these people doing that? They're innovating, they're adapting, and they are able to make sure that they stay on top of their businesses. So at the end, it's your choice whether you want to see COVID-19 as collateral damage, or do you want to see it as an opportunity for something better and innovate. So that's one of the things that you all as problem solvers need to do, right? Adapt and innovate. The other thing is flexibility and openness and building brand equity. So these are sensitive times, and in complex times like these, companies and employees can make or break your destiny, right? What should you do in such times? I think it's important that you invest your time, resources, money at long-term brand building and understand that your consumers can be your friend and really build that brand equity instead of focusing on maybe revenues, maybe on profits. You should rather focus on how can you build that brand equity? How can you be flexible and open to your consumers, to your customers, to your needs of your employees? And some good examples here are, Lifebuoy is distributing free hand washes and sanitizers to their consumers with limited resources. Why does it need to do that? It's basically doing that to build that brand equity, to connect to the consumer. And this is going to definitely help them in the long term. Similarly, Asian Paints, they're not going to be, they're not going to get any contracts right now, but then with their stay-at-home advertisement and their people add color kind of, this the picture that I'm displaying here, it's just connecting at an emotional level to their consumers. So be flexible and be open to diverse perspectives and focus on building a brand equity in complex times. The other thing is to have an eagle vision, take risks, and make unconventional decisions. This is very important for all problem solvers, that you need to be having the ability to look at your long-term gains when you're faced with a complex situation, right? You need to change your perspective and look at the world with a different lens to be able to find innovative solutions and problems. And when times are tough, people are also kind of ready to break routine. Like you've all seen in our current situation that we've all broken our older habits and we're all getting into the new routines, right? So it's important for you to have that eagle vision of how can that changing behavior of consumer help you in your business, and take that risk and make those unconventional decisions and go out there and launch something new. And some examples that I have here are, companies like Netflix, Hotstar, they're coming up with newer programs, they're expanding their reach and clientele because they know that's what people need at the moment. Zoom also has removed its 40-minute restriction from its free plan. These are small steps, but they ensure that people are hooked onto you and then remain loyal to you even after the times change, right? Byju's and Google Classroom have also made sure that learning doesn't stop, and they are addressing the needs and worry of parents about the continued education. So in times like these, go out there, take risks, make unconventional decisions for longer term benefits. Finally, knowing your changing customer is extremely important in complex times. During complexities, companies have to relook at their current campaigns and see if whether the tone and the content and what you are promising and what you're giving to your consumer is still appropriate and is still applicable or not. It's important to understand the fear and concerns of your people, of your consumers, and take a stand by which you can, build enduring and long-lasting relationships. And to always be ahead of the game, you need to know how the customer needs are evolving and then cater to that. So this is not going to give you result only in the short term, but also in the longer term. And one example I have is this. If you know about this, there's a Kochi-based startup, Asimo Robotics. They have developed a robot or a bot that can be deployed into hospital, and that robot can carry food, medical and clinical consumables, and move around in hospitals and give food and all to the patients. So what does this do? It's avoiding the contact of your frontline workers with COVID-19 patients as much as it can, right? So this is a very innovative solutions, and they did that just in 15 days. They knew that's the need of the hour. So that's how you should all kind of evaluate the needs, changing customers, and then innovate, adapt, and then give out solutions that are going to benefit in the long term. So in the end, what is problem solving not then? Problem solving is not a blame game or pointing fingers at who created the problem and penalizing them. It's not about that, right? It's about finding out what the issue is and fixing it for long term. It's not going overboard in thinking worst case scenarios and trying to do things which are not needed. It's also not applying the same principles and tools and techniques for each problem, or in other words, practicing a learned routine behavior. At the end, problem solving is more about fixing things that are important, addressing the long-term risks, improving performance, seizing opportunities for innovation, right? And I always say this, that what is important about problem solving is not the tools and techniques you know, but it is rather a state of mind of how are you going to be approaching it? How open can you be? How innovative can you be? How flexible and adaptive can you be, right? So it's that state of mind that eventually helps you to go down that road of problem solving. So at the end, remember, you can never solve a problem on the same level at which it was created, as our great Albert Einstein always puts it. Okay, so that's what I had. And Sharnita, do we open it up for questions?
Yeah, we open it up for questions. You can either type on the chat window or unmute yourself and ask a question. We already have a few questions that's come up on my chat window. I'll read it out for you, Sakshi.
Sure.
The problems that crop up during this lockdown are new and unprecedented. How do I seek information on solving them?
Yeah, so that's right. So I think, like I said during my presentation, for problems like these, and it's not about just complex times, right? But in general, when you're dealing with unknown problems, unknown set of issues, the most important thing is to reach out to the right people and ask the right questions, right? Sometimes you don't have the data and all the information with you, but in order to get that, when you're asking the right questions to the right people, even if it may not be a formalized set of questions, an interview of sorts, but just a casual chat over coffee or over a phone or just a normal conversation, the kind of answers and information you can collect by asking those questions to the right people is unbelievable. And once you have your basic set of information and data, and then it's easier to navigate through that and see what needs to be done.
Yes, we have another one which has come up. It says the communication gap caused by distance at this time is making things difficult at work. How do I solve this?
So I think because we have a mental barrier, right, that communication can only be face to face. I think most of us are facing that problem. But I think to understand that it doesn't always have to be a face-to-face conversation. You can connect. There are so many ways, and thanks to the technology and digital technology today, there are so many ways to connect, right? So and one piece of advice that I would give here is that rather than always connecting to audio, try and use video, because what happens in audio is you don't have people's attention. You're multitasking, you're doing different things, you're working while you're talking. And so the attention level is reduced, and therefore you feel the disconnect. So what helps in such cases is to have that video connect once in a while with your teams or with your people, which helps you to engage more effectively, um, and also manage the energy, right? And you don't always have to talk about work. Ensure that you're able to give your people that time and attention that they need at a personal level also. So whenever you're starting your conversation, try to connect first at a personal level, um, inquiring about their well-being, and then going on to your work, because when they feel connected with you, that's when they are going to open up more about other things, right? And like I said, video calls help a lot. So you may not have to do that every time you talk, but make sure at least once in a week you have that video connect with all your people where you're all, because when you're on video, you're looking at each other, there is less likelihood of multitasking and really looking at each other and focusing on what the discussion is all about.
We have another one from Namrata. So, I have always been a better leader and a problem solver. If I can communicate face to face, how do I modify my skills in this time?
Yeah, so I think that's, Namrata, something that most of us are facing right now. Uh, but I think it's important to be open and flexible, not just for you, but for your entire team that you lead. Um, and I think the same principles that I mentioned for the last question would apply here also, that you will have to turn to video calling. If you prefer face to face, make sure that you're doing a video. And we're lucky, right, that we are in a generation where we have those facilities and options available. Make use of them, and connect with your people. And if sometimes it is required that you connect more often than you would have when you were on a face to face in an office premises, um, you need to connect more often. Maybe do that, do video calls, connect at a personal level. Yeah, I mean, I think those are the only things you can do to feel that you're connected to each other. You can't be working in silos. You'll have to break down silos. If you have a large team, you'll have to ensure that not just you and your team member one-on-one, but also everybody else connects with each other, and go about it as you would when you were in the office premises. Have those weekly calls, have those one-on-ones on video calls as often as you can, and don't try to make it short. Have if you need to have a large conversation, a big conversation, have that. So remove that boundary from your mind. Remove any kind of barrier that you have in your mind, and try to be open and adapt, because I think this is going to be the new normal for a long time to come. So I think while we are waiting, I might just add a couple of things. What I think is, as a leader, and when you are in such a situation, what can also help is for your teams and yourself is that you create like a central and a very clear list of priorities, for the next 6 months, maybe, or for the whole year, if applicable, and make sure that all your team members are aligned to those key list. And you might have to kind of relook at them from what you would have at the starting of the year, maybe in January or end of the year last year. You might have to reevaluate them basis the current situation. So make sure you have those clear and central reprioritized list, and share it with your team so everybody is aligned, and nobody has that apprehension or fear of what's going to happen, where am I going to focus my energy on? So those are the kind of challenges you can overcome if you have a revamped list, where everybody is aligned and everybody knows what they're required to do, where they're required to focus.
I don't think we have any more questions, Sakshi. I think we could end the session.
Okay.
Yeah. Sakshi, thanks for a wonderful session and introducing us to how to follow a pattern to solve problems. And I would also like to thank all of you who attended this masterclass. And I hope that you take away some essential points and use them while you work from home. Thank you very much.